Welcome to Weekend Ag Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Join us for an in-depth look at Iowa agriculture. Here's your host, Riley Smith.
It may have been a holiday-shortened week due to the Memorial Day holiday, but that doesn't mean there was a lack of ag news across the state of Iowa this week. Welcome into this week's edition of Weekend Ag Matters. I'm Riley Smith. Russ Parker, Dustin Hoffmann, and Mark Magnuson will join us later on in the show. As for right now, let's start with a quick look at the news headlines. John Deere has agreed to a $99 million settlement in a class action lawsuit regarding its right to repair policies, which allegedly restricted farmers' access to necessary diagnostic tools and software for equipment repairs. Austin Pfeiffer, an attorney with Ag and Business Legal Strategies in Hiawatha, Iowa, said this agreement now gives farmers options.
I keep getting emails saying, Google settled this class action and you're entitled to a small amount of money, or Facebook settled that class action and you're entitled to a small amount of money. Well, this is the same idea, but it's going to be a smaller class, so a lot bigger dollars per class member. So check your spam filter. You might see something. It's actually the notice of how you make a claim in this.
Pfeiffer said this class action was brought about under antitrust law.
The settlement includes 10 years of access to certain John Deere tools and technologies that were previously restricted. And so the hope is that will allow farmers and independent repair shops to repair these John Deere tractors and combines and other equipment effectively and bring competition into the market.
Pfeiffer said the right to actually repair your own equipment is the headline here, but adds there is the monetary element as well.
The theory is that by restricting these repair tools, John Deere has been able to charge more than it would have in a competitive market. It's been monopolizing these tools and charging monopoly rents. And just like in the board game, when you have a monopoly, you charge more and you make more money. So that's the theory here.
For more information, visit ablsonline.com. In other news, Iowa State University Extension and Outreach's Ag Management and Leadership Program is now accepting nominations for the annual Iowans Impacting Agriculture recognition. This award celebrates individuals who have made significant contributions to Iowa's agricultural industry and the communities it serves. The Iowans Impacting Agriculture recognition showcases leaders who demonstrate innovation, vision, and a strong commitment to advancing agriculture. To nominate someone making a difference in agriculture, visit Iowans Impacting Agriculture online. Nominations are open now through June 30th at midnight. Anyone may submit a nomination using the brief online application, and the form requests information on the nominee's leadership, contributions, and overall impact on agriculture. Honorees will be recognized at the 10th Annual Ag Leadership Conference, December 2nd through the 3rd, at the Gateway Hotel and Convention Center in Ames. That's all the time we have for news headlines this week. Check out all of our daily ag news stories online at iowaagnet.com. We'll go ahead and kick it over to Russ Parker with his faith-based food for thought here on Weekend Ag Matters.
Ever had a splinter, maybe in your hand or the bottom of your foot? I'll bet most of us had one of those pesky, irritating pieces of something wedge under our skin. Some downright hurt, you feel them go in, and others are more of a process of discovery, resulting in a comment like, "How did that get there?" I remember one splinter I had. Actually, it was a splinter that taught me a lesson. Never put your hand over the edge of the board and then slide your hand down the edge to see if it's smooth. That action resulted in what seemed like a big chunk of edgewood spearing into my skin. And at first it didn't really hurt, but soon after, I knew there was something in there that wasn't supposed to be. And not to be morbid, but it was pretty interesting watching it come out, being pulled by a pair of pliers. Other splinters aren't so easily seen, are they? Like that little piece of metal shaving or the end of a thorn. And of course, we've all had those that we just can't attend to ourselves. Case in point, the bottom of a foot. I recall walking through an area that had just been cleared from some honey locust, and one of those thorns went right through the sole of my boot and into the bottom of my foot. And of course it broke off when I took my boots and socks off, so I needed some help from my wife. And with her on the business end of a hot needle dealing with my stinking foot and digging around in an already sensitive spot, I know I gave her some challenges completing the task of removing that thorn. From the context of life experiences, some splinters go deeper, don't they? Sometimes they're words somebody said years ago, or sometimes it's guilt or regret or anger or pride or even fear. Maybe even a hurt we tried to ignore, hoping eventually it would just work itself out on its own. But buried things have a way of reminding us they're still there. And often removing them is uncomfortable, sometimes painful. Sometimes it requires another set of hands that we trust, someone willing to help us through the process, even when we wince a little along the way. And that's one reason Scripture speaks so often about healing, confession, grace, and restoration. In the book of Psalms, we hear these words, "Search me, O God, and know my heart, and see if there's anything offensive in me." That sounds a little like asking the great physician to help remove what doesn't belong there, doesn't it? Because left alone, splinters usually don't improve with time. They become inflamed, infected, sensitive to the touch, and the same can happen in our spiritual lives too. The good news is this. God doesn't ask us to remove every splinter by ourselves. Through faith, grace, forgiveness, and the caring hands of others around us, healing can begin. Might sting a little, but healing starts that moment the splinter comes out. Food for thought, I hope. This is Russ Parker. Have a blessed day.
Thanks, Russ, and that's it for segment 1 of this week's episode. Coming up after this short break, Dustin visits with Iowa Agriculture Secretary Mike Naig. This is Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
Every county fair has that special person or family. They are there before the gates open and long after the lights go out, helping families with projects and pitching in wherever they're needed, never asking for recognition. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, along with Wiffles Hybrids, is honoring them with the Heart of the County Fair Award. 6 winners will be recognized locally and at the Iowa State Fair, with a plaque, cash prize, VIP passes, and food coupons. Don't delay. Nominations are due June 1st. Visit iowaagnet.com to nominate today.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's your host, Dustin Hoffmann.
Last week on Weekend Ag Matters, we started our conversation with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig, our monthly sit-down, and here is the conclusion of that conversation. Well, and moving on, also part of that Farm Bill situation was the whole mix-up, or I shouldn't say mix-up, but just the confusion over what was going to happen with the year-round E15 provision. Was it going to be part of the Farm Bill? Was it going to get separated? Ultimately, it gets separated. Now, there was some backroom deals that have been talked about quite a bit that got it separated from the Farm Bill, but yet uphill battle last week, and the House got that across the finish line as well.
Well, it drives home something that we thought was always true, and that's that if it got a vote on the floor, it would pass. And frankly, I think that's been what's been so frustrating with all the fits and starts of this E15 legislation component is that there's been, it's been going to be included in several other pieces of legislation or reconciliation packages or this or that. And then something happens and it doesn't get done. And so that's been the frustrating part is we say, my gosh, just give it a vote, give us a chance. And it did exactly as we suspected, which is it passed, and it passed in a bipartisan fashion. So again, these things, there's a process here. You got to pass it through the House. You got to pass it through the Senate. So the fact that it's now across the line in the House is huge. Again, I want to give credit to our entire House delegation, Hinson, Miller Meeks, Feenstra, Nunn. I mean, really relentless on this subject and just trying to push it across the line. Really important here to remember, this is not an E15 mandate for the country, as has been talked about, which is just misleading intentionally. So unfortunately, on the part of some, this is creating an opportunity for fuel marketers to offer for sale on a year-round nationwide basis, E15. In Iowa, the market is telling you it wants it, right? When it's available, Iowans choose it. Iowans saved $60 million last year in fueling costs just by choosing E15 over E10. I mean, if I'm a marketer somewhere in the country and I can offer that kind of savings, I think my competitors are going to follow me. So it's not a mandate. It's not a requirement. It is giving consumers more choice. And again, the proof is in the pudding here, which is when it's available, Iowans pick it.
And another thing, it also brings certainty because we are, the largest ethanol producing state in the country, to have certainty for those producers and for our farmers to know that demand is going to be there.
Absolutely. You can look at this. This is the thing about, I know you and I have talked about this issue of, you can look at this from a consumer standpoint, from an affordability standpoint, and how good it is from that, for the pocketbook. You can talk about it from an environmental benefit standpoint. That's a good thing. You can talk about it from the health of the ethanol industry and what that means for jobs in those communities that surround those plants. And of course, you can talk about it from the perspective of corn demand, domestic, U.S. grown, renewable corn production, and what that can mean for prices. And so it's good on all those fronts. And I think that's worthy of a passage. So again, now the job is to do what it takes to try to move this through the Senate.
And then, of course, last week, all eyes were also on President Trump's visit, the long-awaited summit with President Xi in China. Now, there have been some question marks and a few hints of what came out of that for agriculture. Now, we also know, while agriculture was holding its breath for this is just, ag is just part of the whole general economy that's involved in these discussions. It's not just agriculture, though it is a lion's share of that discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's actually some of the good news is, look, President Trump continues to show that when he talks with the Chinese, when he talks with President Xi, he's willing to raise and prioritize the issues of agriculture. And this is it's not some secondary issue that gets talked about in other rooms. It's something that gets talked about in those main discussions. I mean, that's important. I think typically your conventional wisdom is you're trying to elevate your issues as high as you can and try to get it on that agenda between the two presidents. And clearly agriculture products was on the agenda. So of course we have the soybean purchase agreement that we're still watching, and that's a trust but verify type situation, right? They've made commitments. Will they live up to them? Largely they did in the first round, but they're said they would buy significantly more. So that's yet to be seen, obviously, and will play out later this year. But the announcement that even to reauthorize those beef packers to be able to process and sell to China, or to once again buy chicken paws, chicken feet out of the United States. Those are huge markets. And again, let's be clear. We're not talking about that beef packers would be exporting the types of cuts that we're consuming. These are oftentimes, just like chicken's feet, not consumed in the United States, but a delicacy in China. These are cuts and products and organ meats and offal and things that we don't consume in the United States, and your ability to sell those in other places can actually help the industry and actually be an outlet for those things. So that's it's the type of products, different mix that are going to those things. But look, the good news was, and the early indications are agreement to purchase more. Of course, light on details at this moment, but that's, I think, all positive and headed in the right direction.
All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about here today is we heard, of course, about a case of pseudo-rabies here in Iowa, linked to some pigs in Texas as well. Talk about that situation. I mean, it's the first time we've seen it in quite a while.
It is, and for your viewers and listeners, I think folks will understand that pseudo-rabies virus in swine is not the same rabies that we think of, with your pets, your dog. Different situation. Think of it more like chicken pox and shingles in humans, right? It's something more akin to that. But we did first time that there's been a detection in a commercial herd since 2004, which was when it was eradicated officially from commercial swine production. And it had been prevalent through the 60s, 70s into the 90s and was eradicated through a program. So it was not welcome news by any means, but it had a direct tie back. There were boars that were shipped from Texas from a farm that was an outdoor farm that had opportunity to have access to wild pigs and these pigs on the farm. And pseudorabies is still present in the wild pig, the feral swine population. That is known. And so these spillover events occur from time to time. What made this one different is that those pigs ended up in a small commercial facility in Iowa. We acted swiftly and were able to contain and determine that there was no spread, even no spread within the facility, let alone outside of the facility. And really, we're working now to the facility is cleaned. The animals, unfortunately, had to be depopulated on that site and disposed of. And now we're just in the final stages here of retesting some of the farms in the area as per the protocol to be able to prove to trading partners that we're once again completely free of the virus. So everything's right on track, and we were able to move swiftly with our partners to address the situation.
And I think the one thing to take away from this is there was no threat to anything in the food supply chain whatsoever.
Absolutely. And again, we knew that these particular pigs were affected, and it didn't even spread within the facility. No food safety issue, no human health issue either. And it's okay. It's safe to enjoy pork. In fact, as we come into the grilling season in particular, please enjoy pork and always prepare it properly, but no food safety issue, no human health issue.
Well, Secretary, I want to thank you so much for your time. A lot of ground covered here in May. And of course, we'll be talking about fairs and all kinds of stuff starting next month already.
I look forward to it. Thanks.
That again was Iowa Agriculture Secretary Mike Naig here for our monthly chat. You can find the whole conversation up on our YouTube channel. Well, that's it for segment 2 here of Weekend Ag Matters. Mark Magnuson will be next to wrap up the show. Stay with us.
Your local radio station brings you the local news you depend on. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network complements that with ag news, weather, and market updates tailored for Iowa's farmers. Together, we deliver the best of both worlds, local connection and industry expertise. It's all to keep you connected with the heartbeat of the heartland. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, connecting rural Iowa with the news that matters to you.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here is Mark Magnuson.
In this week's edition of Weekend Ag Matters, I bring you a segment of the latest episode, the June episode of Pods of Potential, the joint podcast between the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network and Iowa Soybean Association. Here is a clip from that episode, and you can find the full episode online on our website at iowaagnet.com. Just click on the homepage banner or click on the podcast link.
Hello and welcome into this episode of the Pods of Potential podcast. Today's episode is episode number 31, Water Monitoring with Tony Seaman and Thomas Fawcett. Today we're diving into water quality and the importance of water monitoring. And we're here with our friends at the Iowa Soybean Association's Research Center for Farming Innovations, Water Lab Service Manager Tony Seaman, and Heartland Co-op's Strategic Partnership Coordinator Thomas Fawcett.
The Iowa Soybean Association's Research Center for Farming Innovation, driven to deliver productive, profitable, and sustainable practices to Iowa's farmers.
Looking to boost productivity and enhance soil health on your farm? Join the Iowa Soybean Association's Research Center for Farming Innovation in the field this summer at an event near you. This summer's hands-on field days explore how conservation and research work hand in hand on farms like yours. Hear from experts and fellow farmers about cover crop management, long-term effects, and methods to mitigate potential yield risks during our Roots and Results field days happening in June. To register for a field day near you, explore other events, visit iasoybeans.com/events.
So guys, let's get to know each other a little bit better here as we start off today's episode. Tony, could you tell me please about yourself and your role at Iowa Soybean Association?
Yeah, Mark. Well, I just had my 20th year anniversary with ISA. And so back in 2006, when I started, I was a water quality technician in kind of the early days of our water quality monitoring program. And as the program has grown and expanded and extended and evolved, I've been there the whole way to now I oversee and run our water quality lab, our certified water quality lab, and oversee all the water sampling around the state.
And Tony, you mentioned that, a 20-year run. Was Iowa Soybean kind of on the leading edge then of, water quality monitoring and kind of getting into things maybe even before some other people were?
The water monitoring program with Agriculture's Clean Water Alliance that Thomas will talk about actually goes back to 2000, and they just celebrated their 25th anniversary last year. And so that kind of shows the dedication that both Iowa Soybean and Agriculture's Clean Water Alliance have had to water monitoring. They've gone on to do other things as well, but that's really kind of been the backbone and the foundation of all our water monitoring.
Well, Tony, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. And also today, I am joined by Thomas Fawcett. Again, he is Heartland Co-op's Strategic Partnership Coordinator. And Thomas, thanks for joining us on the show today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Heartland Co-op and also Agriculture's Clean Water Alliance?
Yes, thanks, Mark, for having me today. I've been working with Heartland Co-op for over 20 years. I started in 2005, worked for quite a few years in the precision ag department, but in 2020, I launched our conservation department. It was kind of our first launch of hiring conservation agronomists and building an actual department focused on conservation adoption at Heartland. So since then, in 2020, I hired Ruth McCabe, our first conservation agronomist, and I've been helping her build this program over the last 6 years. We now have 5 full-time employees with the conservation department. We've been working really hard to get conservation adopted across our trade territory. In that time, we've positioned over 300,000 acres of cover crop acres. We've installed over 250 saturated buffers and bioreactors, and we're working on 12 large-scale wetlands and oxbows that we've been working on. So we've gotten a lot of conservation on the ground. It's been a pretty neat venture over the last few years, and it's been a lot of fun to see Heartland really step forward in building this program over the last 5 years.
Well, guys, thanks for a little bit of an introduction about each of yourselves. And let's now jump into the meat of today's episode. Again, we are talking water monitoring and joined by Tony Seaman and Thomas Fawcett. And Tony, you talked about it a little bit, been working on this for quite some time with Iowa Soybean Association. But could you tell us just the big picture about Iowa Soybean Association's history of leading statewide conservation and water quality monitoring efforts, please?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, going back to 2000, we worked with Agriculture's Clean Water Alliance on water quality monitoring in the Raccoon River. And this was in partnership with Des Moines Waterworks, looking at all the tributaries and subwatersheds that drain into that, trying to give a higher resolution picture of water quality to deal with the nitrate issue. As that evolved, we expanded into other locations around the state, first the Boone and Des Moines rivers, and now statewide. In 2011, we actually built our own certified water lab. And so that allowed us to bring our water monitoring in-house and expand what we were doing. And so since that time, we've kept up all the stream monitoring and the river monitoring, but we've also kind of tried to get closer to the farmer. And so what we've been gearing towards in recent years is really trying to work with individual farmers, looking at the drainage off their individual fields, tie that back to management practices to evaluate what they're doing, where they're at, and where they might want to go to address some of the issues that agriculture has on water quality.
And when you talk to farmers about water quality, kind of what are their initial thoughts when you're first meeting with them, or people that are interested in this space, in a big way? What are their thoughts in general about water quality?
Well, it's usually common that they think one of two things. The first one is that, you can look at that water. It's great. It's leaving my farm because I do no-till or I rotate or whatever their favorite practice is. I don't have a problem with water quality. Or the flip side is, I don't want you looking at that water quality because it's probably really bad. And, where I come from is, well, either of those things are true. Wouldn't you actually want to know that? For one, if it's really good, wouldn't you want to stand up and tell everybody that, hey, my water's helping the river. I'm better than what's in the river. Or if it's really bad, wouldn't you see that as a sign of inefficiency and loss and, a loss of dollars and a chance to improve your profitability and bring that back into line with what we would expect? And then the reality is once we get into it and get a few samples, generally we find most people are kind of in the middle and, some tweaks here and, they're really not that much different than everybody. And they do have an impact on the river. And then we can start to have a conversation about adaptive management and things they can do to try to continually be better and try and improve water quality so that stakeholders downstream and statewide, can know that they're doing something and that we're making progress on these issues.
And Thomas, to what Tony's talking about there, do you find the same experience when you talk to farmers on their thoughts on water quality? Do you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I think it's one of the great things about water testing is, water quality is a hard thing to measure. And it's hard for farmers to really understand what's happening, especially when we look at water that's running through the tile lines. We can see erosion. We can see wind erosion, water erosion. Those are things that are visual. But when we're thinking about tile lines, it's really hard to know exactly what's happening there. And so when we look at testing, we're able to actually put a number to what's happening there. And I think one of the most powerful things is to start to show improvement. So if a grower can see that they are actually making an improvement through the things that they're doing on their farm, that's a huge win, because now we're able to actually prove to somebody that these things you're doing, the risks that you're taking, there's challenges there that you have to overcome when you're adopting these practices, but it's actually making a difference. And we can start to measure that. I think that's where we start to see real impact with connecting those dots. We're making these changes and we can see an impact.
And a reminder, you can find the full episode of Pods of Potential on our website at iowaagnet.com. Just click on the banner on the homepage or the podcast tab. And with that, it brings us to the end of today's episode of Weekend Ag Matters. For Russ Parker, Dustin Hoffmann, and Riley Smith, I'm Mark Magnuson. You've been listening to Weekend Ag Matters. You can find the full episode of this show under the podcast tab at iowaagnet.com. You're listening to the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.